Picture this. You're huddled in a cave 40,000 years ago, your breath forming ice crystals in the bitter air. Outside, the temperature has plummeted to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and the howling wind carries the scent of death. Massive cave bears prowl the darkness, their growls echoing off stone walls like thunder from hell itself. Saber-toothed cats wait patiently in the shadows, knowing that one mistake, one moment of vulnerability, will turn you into their next meal. Your stomach gnaws at itself. The last mammoth kill was 3 days ago, and the meat is nearly gone. Your fire flickers dangerously low, each dying ember bringing you closer to a frozen death. But here's what separates you from becoming just another fossil in the archaeological record. What you sleep on tonight will determine whether you see tomorrow's dawn. Forget everything Hollywood has taught you about primitive cavemen dragging their knuckles and grunting like animals. The archaeological evidence reveals a truth so sophisticated, so ingeniously brutal, that would make modern survival experts weep with envy. Your ancestors weren't bumbling primitives stumbling through the darkness. They were thermal engineers who transformed the frozen wasteland of Ice Age Earth into humanity's first luxury hotel. What I'm about to reveal will shatter every assumption you have about prehistoric life. We're talking about sleeping technologies so advanced that modern outdoor gear companies are still trying to reverse engineer them. Bedding systems so sophisticated that Navy SEALs would trade their modern equipment for these ancient innovations. Survival strategies so ruthlessly efficient that they enable the hairless, weak species to not just survive, but absolutely dominate a planet ruled by creatures that could snap your spine like kindling. The evidence comes from archaeological sites that have rewritten everything we thought we knew about Ice Age survival. At Sibudu Cave in South Africa, researchers discovered 77,000-year-old bedding that would make a 5-star hotel jealous. At Border Cave, they found pest control systems that modern exterminators can't match. And at sites across Europe, they uncovered sleeping technology so advanced it took humanity 70,000 years to improve upon it. But this isn't just ancient history. As our modern world faces climate uncertainty, supply chain disruptions, and technological failures, the survival wisdom encoded in these prehistoric sleeping systems might be the difference between thriving and dying in an uncertain future. Your ancestors faced down ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and predators that could tear through flesh like paper. And they did it all while getting a better night's sleep than most modern humans. So settle in, because we're about to journey back to a time when your bedroom was a battlefield, your mattress was a miracle of engineering, and your pillow could literally save your life. Welcome to the ultimate guide to Ice Age bedding, where comfort met catastrophe. And somehow, comfort won. The Sibudu Revolution, when beds became weapons against death. The first bombshell drops at Sibudu Cave in South Africa, where Dr. Lynn Wadley made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. Layer after layer of sediment, each representing thousands of years, revealed the same pattern. Grass mattresses so sophisticated they'd shame modern manufacturing. But here's the kicker. These weren't random piles of vegetation thrown together by desperate survivors. They were engineered sleep systems dating back 77,000 years, constructed with methodical precision that borders on the obsessive. The base layer consisted of sedge grass stems, arranged like a prehistoric box spring to provide structural support and drainage. But it's the top layer that reveals the true genius. Leaves from Cryptocarya woodii, a tree whose crushed foliage releases natural insect repellent compounds. Your ancestors weren't just building beds. They were manufacturing bug-free zones in a world where a single infected bite could mean agonizing death. The dimensions tell their own story of Ice Age luxury. These mattresses measured up to 22 square feet, large enough for an entire family, and stood 12 inches thick. That's not a sleeping pad. That's a prehistoric California king. The compressed layers show evidence of repeated use, careful maintenance, and systematic replacement. This wasn't camping. This was permanent residential engineering. But here's where it gets really wild. When the bedding became too infested or worn, they didn't abandon it like modern hunter-gatherers do. They burned it deliberately. The charcoal layers at Sibudu reveal a maintenance schedule that would impress any modern facility manager. Burn the old bedding, spread ash to deter insects, lay down fresh materials, rinse and repeat for 40,000 years. Think about the implications. This level of bedding technology required not just knowledge, but culture. Someone had to discover that Cryptocarya woodii repelled insects. Someone had to figure out the optimal grass-to-leaf ratio. Someone had to develop the burning protocols. And all of this knowledge had to be passed down through generations, refined and perfected across millennia. The chemical analysis reveals just how sophisticated this pest control really was. The crushed Cryptocarya leaves don't just smell bad to insects. They contain compounds that disrupt insect nervous systems. It's essentially a natural pesticide factory built into every mattress. Your ancestors were practicing biochemical warfare against bugs 70,000 years before we invented DDT. But Sibudu wasn't unique. Similar bedding systems appear across Africa during the same period, suggesting this technology spread through trade networks and cultural exchange. By 77,000 years ago, humans had developed standardized sleep systems that were being shared across vast distances. The first global bedroom standards, if you will. The preservation at Sibudu also reveals something heartbreaking: evidence of family sleeping arrangements. The wear patterns show adult-sized impressions flanked by smaller depressions. Children sleeping between parents for warmth and protection. In a world where cave bears denayed 50 feet away and leopards hunted at night, the family bed wasn't just about bonding. It was about survival. And here's the detail that'll give you chills. They oriented their beds to face the cave entrance. Always. Every single layer, across 40,000 years of occupation, shows the same pattern. Even in sleep, they were ready to fight or flee. The bedding wasn't just about comfort. It was a tactical position designed for rapid deployment in case of night attacks. The Sibudu bedding represents humanity's first victory over the hostile African night. For the first time in evolutionary history, our ancestors could sleep deeply, comfortably, and safely. This wasn't just better rest. This was the foundation of everything that followed. Because only a well-rested species could develop the complex culture, technology, and social structures that would eventually conquer the planet. Border Cave, the world's first integrated pest management system. 600 miles north at Border Cave, archaeologists uncovered something that made the Sibudu discovery look primitive. Here, 200,000 years ago, our ancestors weren't just making beds. They were running what can only be described as the world's first integrated pest management system. The setup was ingenious in its simplicity. Grass, sheaves from the Panacoideae subfamily formed the base, chosen specifically for their cushioning properties and natural resistance to decay. But it's what came next that reveals the true sophistication. Layers of wood ash strategically spread between the grass layers like a prehistoric pesticide sandwich. The ash wasn't random. Chemical analysis shows it came from specific trees, primarily Tarchonanthus camphoratus, camphor bush, which burns to create ash with natural insecticidal properties. The microscopic structure of this ash is brutal to insects. It clogs their breathing apparatus, desiccates their exoskeletons, and creates an alkaline environment that destroys their eggs. It's chemical warfare disguised as housekeeping. But here's where Border Cave gets really impressive: the maintenance schedule. The occupants didn't just build these beds once and hope for the best. They operated on a systematic rotation, burning old bedding, analyzing ash coverage, and timing new construction to optimize pest control. Archaeological evidence shows this system operated continuously for 160,000 years. That's longer than our species has existed outside Africa. The precision is staggering. The ash layers are exactly thick enough to deter insects without creating respiratory problems for humans. Too thin, and bugs break through. Too thick, and people can't breathe. Someone figured out the optimal ratio through trial and error, then encoded that knowledge into cultural practices that survived for millennia. The bedding arrangement reveals sophisticated understanding of cave dynamics. The sleeping areas cluster near the back wall, where body heat accumulates and predators can't approach from behind, but they're positioned to avoid the deepest recesses where carbon dioxide pools and humidity breeds disease. It's environmental engineering that would challenge modern architects. Evidence of specialized tools appears throughout the border cave sequence. Grass-cutting implements, ash spreaders, even what appear to be prehistoric bedding rakes for maintaining surface texture. These people weren't just using what they found. They were manufacturing purpose-built equipment for sleep system maintenance. The most remarkable discovery came from microscopic analysis of the bedding layers. Human skin cells, hair, and even traces of ochre pigment, suggesting these beds weren't just functional. They were personal. Individual families maintained their own sleeping areas with distinctive arrangements, almost like prehistoric interior decorating. But the real genius was the integrated approach. The same ash that deterred insects also provided fire safety. It wouldn't ignite if sparks from the hearth landed on the bedding. The grass selection wasn't just about comfort. Different species had different burning characteristics, allowing for controlled maintenance fires that cleaned the bedding without destroying the cave. The social implications are staggering. This level of bedding sophistication required cooperation, planning, and resource management. Someone had to gather specific grasses during optimal seasons. Someone had to maintain the fires that produced the right ash. Someone had to coordinate the burning schedules to ensure continuous sleeping availability for the entire group. Border Cave reveals that 200,000 years ago, our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were optimizing. They turned sleep from a vulnerable necessity into a comfortable, safe, and hygienic experience. The foundation was set for everything that would follow. The complex societies, the technological innovations, the cultural achievements that would eventually transform a small band of African apes into the dominant species on Earth. And it all started with figuring out how to sleep without being eaten, bitten, or frozen to death. The border cave bedding system wasn't just engineering. It was the beginning of human civilization, one comfortable night at a time. Oh, Halo 2. The moment humans transcended nature. But if Sibudu and Border Cave were impressive, Oh, Halo 2 was revolutionary. 23,000 years ago, on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, our ancestors achieved something that wouldn't be seen again until the invention of modern mattress manufacturing. Mass-produced, standardized sleeping surfaces with integrated attachment systems. The preservation at Oh, Halo 2 is miraculous. Waterlogged sediments that captured every detail of daily life like prehistoric amber. And what they reveal is a bedding technology so advanced it seems almost alien for its time period. We're talking about engineered sleep surfaces that use materials science, mechanical engineering, and even early chemistry. The construction method was revolutionary. Instead of loose grass layers like earlier sites, the Oh, Halo 2 inhabitants created thick grass bunches and arranged them in overlapping patterns like prehistoric shingles, designed to shed moisture and distribute weight evenly. But here's the breakthrough. They used a clay-based adhesive to bind the grass bunches together, creating the world's first composite mattress material. The clay adhesive wasn't just mud. Chemical analysis reveals a sophisticated mixture. Local clay combined with organic binders, probably plant saps, heated to specific temperatures to achieve optimal adhesion without becoming brittle. They'd essentially invented a prehistoric polymer, a flexible, waterproof bonding agent that held the entire sleep system together. The engineering precision is mind-blowing. The grass bunches were sized uniformly, suggesting standardized manufacturing processes. The clay application shows consistent thickness and coverage patterns. Most impressively, the entire system was modular. Damaged sections could be replaced without rebuilding the entire bed. It's preventive maintenance thinking that wouldn't reappear until the Industrial Revolution. But Oh, Halo 2's real innovation was spatial optimization. Unlike the family-style bedding at earlier sites, these sleeping areas were individually sized and positioned. Analysis shows beds designed for single adults, couples, and family groups, each optimized for different thermal and space requirements. They'd invented custom bedding 20,000 years before anyone else. The positioning reveals sophisticated understanding of indoor climate control. The beds weren't randomly placed, but positioned to take advantage of heat circulation patterns within the structures. Thermal mapping of the preserved floor surfaces shows that sleeping areas were located in zones that would maintain optimal temperatures throughout the night. These people understood convection currents. Tool marks on the preserved bedding show evidence of maintenance activities. Regular fluffing to maintain loft, systematic replacement of worn sections, and even what appears to be seasonal reconfiguration, lighter arrangements for warm weather, denser configurations for cold periods. This wasn't static technology. It was adaptive engineering. The most stunning discovery was evidence of quality control. Some grass bunches show signs of being rejected and discarded. Microscopic analysis reveals inferior grass species, improper preparation, or inadequate sizing. Someone was inspecting these materials and maintaining manufacturing standards. Quality assurance 23,000 years ago. The social implications are staggering. This level of bedding sophistication required specialized knowledge, dedicated labor, and resource allocation that goes far beyond basic survival. The Ohelo 2 inhabitants weren't just making places to sleep. They were investing in comfort, health, and quality of life. This suggests a society with surplus resources and the leisure time to pursue optimization rather than mere survival. The preservation also reveals personal touches, where patterns that suggest individual sleeping preferences, small modifications that indicate user customization, even evidence of repairs made with different materials, probably when preferred resources weren't available. These beds weren't just functional. They were personal spaces that people cared about and maintained. Perhaps most remarkably, the Ohelo 2 bedding shows evidence of continuous improvement. The lower layers use simpler techniques and materials, while upper layers show increasingly sophisticated methods. Someone was experimenting, innovating, and passing knowledge down through generations. This was active technological development, not static tradition. The Ohelo 2 site represents the moment when human bedding technology achieved something unprecedented. It became better than what nature provided. For millions of years, our ancestors had made do with whatever natural materials they could find. But at Ohelo 2, they began manufacturing superior alternatives. They'd crossed the threshold from using nature to improving upon it. This wasn't just about sleeping anymore. The Ohelo 2 bedding represents the birth of human engineering thinking. The idea that natural limitations could be overcome through knowledge, planning, and systematic improvement. Every technology that followed, from agriculture to spaceflight, flows from this fundamental insight. Humans don't have to accept the world as they find it. 23,000 years ago, beside an ancient lake, our ancestors achieved something profound. They didn't just survive the night, they conquered it. And in doing so, they laid the foundation for every comfort, every innovation, every achievement in human history. All because someone figured out how to sleep better than nature intended. The fur revolution, turning predators into protectors. But grass and clay were just the beginning. The real game changer came when our ancestors discovered they could turn their predators into their protectors by sleeping on their skins. The archaeological evidence reveals a transformation so profound it literally changed human physiology. The moment we began wearing the night instead of hiding from it. The story begins in Morocco 300,000 years ago, where cut marks on animal bones tell a tale of desperate innovation. These aren't butchery marks. They're skinning marks made with tools specifically designed to remove pelts intact. Someone had figured out that the same animals trying to kill them could, in death, keep them alive through the night. The progression is written in stone tools across Africa and Europe. Early skinning implements are crude, effective only on small animals. But by 200,000 years ago, we see specialized hide-working tools that could process everything from rabbit fur to mammoth hide. These weren't weapons repurposed for skinning. They were purpose-built leather manufacturing equipment. The sophistication escalates rapidly. At sites across Europe, archaeologists find evidence of hide preparation that would impress modern tanners. Scraping tools designed to remove fat without damaging the skin. Smoking apparatus that preserved pelts for months. Even early chemical processing using plant tannins and animal brains to create supple, waterproof leather. But it's the selection criteria that reveal true expertise. Analysis of preserved furs shows our ancestors weren't just using whatever they could kill. They were targeting specific animals for specific properties. Reindeer for winter coats. Hollow hairs provide incredible insulation. Wolf fur for moisture resistance. Rabbit pelts for infant bedding. This was strategic resource harvesting based on deep understanding of material properties. The numbers are staggering. A complete winter sleep system required at least 5 large animals. 2 reindeer for the base layer, 1 bear for the top covering, and multiple smaller animals for gaps and repairs. That's 2,000 pounds of predator that had to be killed, processed, and converted into bedding before winter arrived. The logistical coordination required would challenge modern manufacturing. The processing technology evolved at breakneck speed. By 100,000 years ago, hide preparation had become a specialized craft. Archaeological sites showed dedicated leatherworking areas with sophisticated tool kits, scrapers for fat removal, smoothers for texture, piercing tools for joining pieces. These workshops produced bedding materials that lasted for years, not months. The thermal engineering was extraordinary. Fur bedding systems show evidence of layering principles that modern outdoor gear manufacturers still use. Moisture-wicking inner layers, insulating middle sections, and wind-resistant outer shells. A complete Ice Age sleep system could maintain body temperature in conditions that would kill an unprotected human in hours. But here's what separates human hide work from animal behavior. We didn't just use pelts, we improved them. Evidence from multiple sites shows our ancestors were modifying natural fur properties through processing techniques. Controlled stretching to increase surface area. Chemical treatments to enhance water resistance. Even primitive dyeing using ochre and plant materials. The social implications are profound. This level of hide processing required specialized knowledge that took years to master. Someone had to learn which animals to target at which times of year. Winter pelts are thicker. Someone had to develop the chemical processes that preserve skins without making them toxic. Someone had to figure out the construction techniques that turned random pieces into integrated sleep systems. The evidence shows these skills were primarily held by women. Tool wear patterns on female skeletons, spatial analysis of leatherworking areas near hearths, even burial goods that include specialized hide processing equipment with female remains. This suggests that while men might have provided the raw materials through hunting, women were the engineers who transformed death into comfort. The quality standards were uncompromising. Rejected hide pieces appear at every major site. Furs that didn't meet requirements for softness, thickness, or durability. In a world where every resource was precious, the fact that people were discarding inadequate materials speaks to how critical proper bedding was for survival. The innovation continued relentlessly. By 50,000 years ago, we see evidence of composite fur systems. Different animal skins sewn together to combine the best properties of each. Rabbit fur for softness against the skin. Deer hide for structural integrity. Wolf pelts for weather resistance. These weren't just blankets, they were engineered textile systems. The preservation at some sites is so good we can still see the stitching. Microscopic analysis reveals thread made from sinew, plant fibers, even human hair in emergencies. The sewing techniques show sophisticated understanding of stress distribution, load-bearing, and thermal bridging. These people were textile engineers 40,000 years before weaving was invented. Perhaps most remarkably, the fur bedding shows evidence of inheritance. Where patterns suggest some sleep systems were used by multiple generations, carefully maintained and passed down as family treasures. In a world where most possessions were utilitarian and disposable, bedding had become valuable enough to inherit. The transformation was complete. Our ancestors had gone from being prey that slept in terror to predators that slept in luxury, wrapped in the skins of everything that had once hunted them. They'd turned the food chain upside down and made their former predators into their servants. And every night, as they settled into beds made from bear fur and wolf pelts, they were reminded of their victory over the hostile world that had tried so hard to kill them. This wasn't just survival, it was dominance. And it all started with figuring out how to sleep warm in a cold world. Fire, the technology that tamed the night. But even the most sophisticated fur bedding was useless without the one technology that separated humans from every other species on Earth: fire. The archaeological evidence reveals that our ancestors didn't just discover how to make fire. They invented the world's first central heating systems, turning caves into climate-controlled luxury suites that would make modern hotels envious. The revolution begins at Kizim Cave in Israel 400,000 years ago, where archaeologists uncovered evidence of controlled indoor fires that burned continuously for centuries. These weren't random campfires. They were engineered heating systems with dedicated fuel supplies, sophisticated ventilation, and even backup ignition sources. Someone had figured out how to domesticate fire itself. The thermal engineering was extraordinary. Cave hearths weren't randomly placed, but positioned to maximize heat circulation while minimizing smoke exposure. Computational fluid dynamics models of preserved cave sites show that our ancestors understood convection patterns, heat reflection, and airflow in ways that modern HVAC engineers would recognize and respect. The fuel management reveals systematic planning that extended across seasons. Analysis of charcoal remains shows stockpiling of specific wood types: hardwoods for long-burning base fires, softwoods for quick ignition, even dried fungi and animal fat for emergency fuel when wood was scarce. These people were energy portfolio managers 400,000 years before economics was invented. But it's the integration with bedding systems that shows true genius. The positioning of sleep areas relative to hearths follows mathematical principles of heat distribution that weren't formally described until the 18th century. Beds placed too close would overheat and create fire hazards. Too far away, and people would freeze. The optimal distance required understanding thermal radiation, air circulation, and human physiology. The evidence from European caves reveals even more sophisticated systems. At sites like Grotte du Lazaret in France, archaeologists found evidence of zoned heating. Different areas maintained at different temperatures for different activities. Sleeping areas kept warm but not hot. Work areas with higher temperatures for toolmaking. Storage areas kept cool to preserve food. These people had invented climate control. The maintenance systems were incredibly sophisticated. Firekeeping wasn't a casual responsibility, but a specialized role requiring deep technical knowledge. Archaeological evidence shows dedicated fire-tending tools, bellows made from animal bladders, fuel storage systems, even early chimney designs that channeled smoke away from living areas while retaining heat. The backup systems reveal planning that would impress modern emergency managers. Multiple ignition sources were maintained simultaneously. Bank coals that could smolder for days, firebow sets ready for immediate use, even fire-carrying technology that allowed flames to be transported between locations. These people understood that fire failure meant death, and they planned accordingly. The social coordination required was staggering. Fire maintenance needed 24-hour attention during winter months. Someone had to gather fuel. Someone had to tend flames. Someone had to manage smoke and ash removal. This level of coordination required social structures, role specialization, and communication systems that went far beyond simple survival groups. The innovation never stopped. By 100,000 years ago, we see evidence of advanced fire technology that wouldn't be reinvented until medieval times. Controlled draft systems that regulated flame intensity, heat banking techniques that stored thermal energy in stones, even primitive fire-resistant materials that protected bedding from sparks and embers. The psychological impact was as important as the physical benefits. Fire transformed night from a time of terror into a time of safety and productivity. Archaeological evidence shows that most tool-making, food preparation, and social activities occurred around evening fires. These weren't just heating systems. They were the foundation of human culture. The energy calculations are mind-blowing. A properly managed cave fire could maintain livable temperatures for 30 to 40 people through the harshest winter conditions while consuming less fuel than a modern wood stove. The efficiency was achieved through careful cave selection, optimal fire placement, and heat circulation techniques that maximized every BTU. The integration with other technologies created synergistic effects. Fire-heated stones could be moved to bedding areas for localized warming. Smoke from specific plants repelled insects while providing heat. Hot coals could be buried under sleeping areas for all-night warmth. The entire cave became an integrated life support system. Perhaps most remarkably, the fire management shows evidence of individual innovation and improvement. Different caves showed different heating techniques, suggesting ongoing experimentation and technological development. Knowledge was shared between groups, creating innovation networks that spanned continents and thousands of years. The mastery was so complete that some groups began using fire offensively, creating heat barriers that kept predators away, using smoke signals for long-distance communication, even employing controlled burns to modify landscapes for better hunting. Fire had gone from a tool for survival to a weapon for environmental control. By the time our ancestors began their global expansion, they weren't just carrying fire. They were carrying the knowledge to turn any cave, any shelter, any sleeping area into a warm, safe, comfortable home. They'd solved the fundamental problem that had killed most large mammals during ice ages: how to stay warm enough to survive the night. The cave fires that warmed our ancestors' bedding were more than just heating systems. They were the forges where human civilization was born. Every warm night, every comfortable sleep, every morning our ancestors woke up refreshed instead of dead was another step toward the complex societies that would eventually conquer the planet. All because someone figured out how to sleep warm in a cold world. Mammoth bone palaces, when architecture became art. But the ultimate expression of Ice Age sleeping technology wasn't found in Africa or the Middle East. It was discovered in the frozen tundra of Eastern Europe, where archaeologists uncovered architectural achievements so sophisticated they rewrote the history of human engineering. Mammoth bone houses with integrated sleeping systems that turned the remains of giants into palaces for survivors. The first discovery at Mezhyrich, Ukraine, left archaeologists speechless. Emerging from the permafrost was a structure built entirely from mammoth bones: skulls for foundations, tusks for framework, shoulder blades for walls. But this wasn't crude shelter construction. This was precision engineering that would challenge modern architects working with conventional materials. The numbers are staggering. 149 mammoths contributed to just 4 structures. That's 3,000 individual bones, each weighing between 50 and 200 pounds, precisely selected and positioned according to engineering principles that distributed weight, maximized thermal efficiency, and created living spaces that could house entire communities through Arctic winters. The construction techniques reveal sophisticated understanding of structural engineering. Mammoth skulls, each weighing over 200 pounds, were interlocked to create foundations that could support massive loads without shifting. Tusks were heated and bent into curves that formed architectural arches, an engineering principle that wouldn't be formally described until Roman times. Yet these Ice Age architects were using it 15,000 years earlier. But it's the interior design that reveals the true genius. The sleeping areas weren't afterthoughts. They were the central design principle around which everything else was built. Archaeological evidence shows dedicated sleeping zones with different thermal properties: family areas near the center for maximum warmth, individual spaces around the periphery, even specialized areas for the elderly and infants. The thermal engineering was extraordinary. Mammoth bones have natural insulating properties. The marrow cavities trap air, creating dead space that prevents heat transfer. But our ancestors improved on nature's design by selecting specific bones for specific functions. Skulls for foundations because they're the most insulating, long bones for walls because they're the strongest, ribs for roofing because they're the most flexible. The bedding integration was seamless. Inside these bone houses, archaeologists found evidence of sophisticated sleeping systems that combined all the technologies we've discussed: grass mattresses for base comfort, fur coverings for warmth, and fire-heated stones for localized heating. But the mammoth bone architecture created something unprecedented: sleeping areas that maintained comfortable temperatures even when outside conditions dropped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. The scale of these operations defies imagination. Each house required killing at least 40 adult mammoths, animals that stood 11 feet tall and could crush a human with a casual step. The logistics alone would challenge modern construction crews. How do you transport 60,000 pounds of mammoth bones across frozen tundra using only human labor? How do you coordinate the work of dozens of people for months at a time? How do you feed construction crews while they're building instead of hunting? The answer reveals social organization that was far more complex than anyone imagined. These weren't desperate survivors throwing together emergency shelters. These were planned communities with specialized roles, coordinated labor, and long-term resource management. The mammoth bone houses represent the birth of human architecture, the moment we stopped adapting to our environment and started engineering it to suit our needs. The preservation at some sites is so complete we can see evidence of interior decoration. Mammoth bone furniture, sleeping platforms carved from shoulder blades, storage areas built into skull cavities, even artistic elements where bones were arranged in decorative patterns. These people weren't just surviving. They were creating homes, complete with the aesthetic touches that make a house into a dwelling place. The heating systems were integrated into the architecture itself. Central hearths positioned to maximize heat distribution. Smoke holes cut through bone roofing. Even thermal mass systems where certain bones were heated during the day to radiate warmth throughout the night. The entire structure functioned as a giant thermal regulation machine. But perhaps most remarkably, these houses show evidence of multi-generational occupation. Some sites contain evidence of renovation, expansion, even what appears to be inheritance. Newer construction built on foundations laid by previous generations. These weren't temporary shelters, but permanent homes passed down through families across centuries. The site at Kostenki reveals the ultimate achievement: an entire village of mammoth bone houses, each with specialized functions. Sleeping houses for families, workshop houses for toolmaking, storage houses for food preservation. This wasn't just architecture. It was urban planning 20,000 years before cities were supposed to exist. The psychological impact must have been profound. Imagine sleeping inside the bones of the giants that once terrorized your ancestors. Every night, surrounded by mammoth skulls and ribs, our ancestors were reminded of their victory over forces that had seemed invincible. They'd gone from hiding from mammoths to living inside them, the ultimate expression of human dominance over nature. The acoustic properties were carefully considered. Mammoth bone chambers have natural resonance that amplifies sound, but the interior arrangements show evidence of acoustic engineering. Sleeping areas positioned to minimize noise transmission, common areas designed to enhance communication. These people understood that comfortable living required not just physical comfort, but acoustic comfort. The environmental control extended beyond heating. Ventilation systems built into bone arrangements provided fresh air without creating drafts. Drainage systems prevented moisture buildup that could cause hypothermia. Even humidity control, certain bone arrangements that prevented the air from becoming too dry or too moist for comfortable breathing. The maintenance systems reveal long-term thinking that spanned seasons and years. Bone replacement schedules for elements that weathered over time. Structural reinforcement added as buildings aged. Even preventive maintenance, evidence of regular inspection and repair to ensure structural integrity through harsh winter conditions. These mammoth bone palaces represent the pinnacle of Ice Age sleeping technology. They weren't just shelters, they were statements of human triumph over impossible odds. Inside these architectural marvels, families slept in comfort that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years, protected by the bones of the very creatures that had once ruled the frozen world. The mammoth bone houses prove that even in the harshest conditions Earth has ever known, humans found ways to not just survive but thrive. They turned death into shelter, bones into architecture, and survival into art. And in their carefully heated, perfectly insulated sleeping quarters, our ancestors dreamed the dreams that would eventually build civilization. The psychology of Ice Age sleep, when rest became resistance. But the most revolutionary aspect of Ice Age sleeping technology wasn't the materials or engineering. It was the psychological transformation it enabled. For the first time in evolutionary history, humans could rest without terror. This fundamental shift in the human experience of night and vulnerability would reshape our species in ways that echo through every aspect of modern life. Consider what sleep meant before these innovations. For millions of years, every moment of unconsciousness was a gamble with death. Predators hunted specifically during human sleep cycles. Cold could kill within hours. Even minor injuries became fatal without proper rest for healing. Sleep wasn't restoration. It was the most dangerous activity any human could engage in. The archaeological evidence from sites like Kafsa Cave in Israel reveals this transformation in stunning detail. Early layers show sleeping areas positioned defensively, backs to walls, weapons within arm's reach, multiple escape routes planned. These are the arrangements of people who sleep with one eye open, ready to fight or flee at any moment. But something remarkable happens in the upper layers, corresponding to the development of sophisticated bedding systems. Sleep areas move toward the center of living spaces. Weapons are stored rather than clutched. Children sleep separately from adults rather than clinging for protection. This isn't just comfort, it's confidence. The confidence that comes from engineering solutions to existential threats. Dr. Matthew Walker's research on sleep and human development suggests that deep, restorative sleep was crucial for the cognitive development that separated modern humans from earlier species. But that deep sleep was only possible when humans felt truly safe, when their sleeping technology provided not just physical comfort, but psychological security. The bedding systems we've explored weren't just keeping people warm and dry. They were enabling the deep sleep stages crucial for memory consolidation, immune function, and cognitive development. For the first time in human evolution, our ancestors could experience the full sleep cycle without interruption by environmental threats. This psychological shift had profound cultural implications. Around the same time sophisticated bedding appears in the archaeological record, we see an explosion in artistic expression. Cave paintings, carved figurines, musical instruments, complex burial practices all require the kind of cognitive sophistication that depends on high-quality sleep for neural development and creative processing. The social implications were equally revolutionary. When sleep became safe, night became social. Archaeological evidence shows that most cultural activities, storytelling, music making, tool crafting, social bonding, occurred around evening fires. The darkness that had once been humanity's greatest enemy became the backdrop for our greatest achievements. But perhaps most importantly, safe sleep enabled long-term thinking. When you're not just trying to survive the night, you can plan for next week, next season, next generation. The same communities that develop sophisticated bedding also show evidence of seasonal resource planning, complex tool preparation, and multi-generational knowledge transfer. The pregnancy and child-rearing implications were staggering. Pregnant women need additional sleep for fetal development, but this was nearly impossible when sleep meant vulnerability. Advanced bedding systems created the first safe spaces for expecting mothers, enabling proper rest during the most crucial period of human development. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe shows specialized sleeping areas for pregnant women and new mothers, areas with extra insulation, positioning that accommodated physical changes, even what appears to be early postpartum care arrangements. These weren't just beds, they were the first maternity wards. The impact on child development was even more profound. Children need significantly more sleep than adults for proper brain development, but this extended vulnerability made them prime targets for predators. Sophisticated family sleeping arrangements enabled children to get the rest they needed while remaining protected by parental proximity and community vigilance. Sites like Dolny Vestinus show evidence of family sleep clusters that evolved into something resembling modern bedroom arrangements. Children's sleeping areas positioned between parents for warmth and protection. Adolescents given separate but connected spaces as they matured. Even elderly family members accommodated with sleeping arrangements that considered their specific thermal and mobility needs. The neurological implications of quality sleep were revolutionary. Modern neuroscience confirms that the deepest stages of sleep are when the brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, and develops the neural pathways crucial for complex thinking. Without safe, uninterrupted sleep, humans remain trapped in reactive survival mode, unable to develop the abstract thinking that enables technological and cultural advancement. The transition from fear-based to comfort-based sleep explains the cognitive explosion that occurred around 50,000 years ago. Suddenly, humans were creating art, developing complex languages, planning elaborate hunting strategies, and engaging in long-distance trade. All of these activities require the kind of neural development that only occurs during deep, restorative sleep. But the psychological transformation went even deeper. Sleep researchers have discovered that REM sleep, the deepest stage, is when humans process trauma, integrate experiences, and develop emotional resilience. For the first time in evolutionary history, sophisticated bedding systems allowed our ancestors to regularly reach these crucial sleep stages. This emotional processing capability enabled humans to develop the psychological tools necessary for complex social cooperation. You can't build lasting alliances, maintain multi-generational relationships, or engage in elaborate cultural practices when you're constantly operating from a place of sleep-deprived stress and anxiety. The evidence appears in burial practices from this period. Elaborate graves with personal belongings, artistic decorations, and evidence of mourning rituals suggest that humans had developed the emotional sophistication to process grief, honor memory, and contemplate mortality. This kind of abstract emotional processing requires the neural development that only occurs during quality sleep. Even more remarkably, the development of sophisticated sleeping arrangements coincides with the first evidence of care for disabled and elderly community members. Skeletons from this period show individuals with severe disabilities who survived for years with community support. This level of empathy and long-term commitment requires the emotional regulation that develops during deep sleep stages. The creativity explosion of the Upper Paleolithic, the period when cave art, musical instruments, and complex tools suddenly appear, directly correlates with improvements in sleeping technology. Creativity requires the kind of neural connectivity that develops during REM sleep, when the brain makes unexpected connections between disparate memories and experiences. Dr. Alice Robb's research on dream psychology suggests that many of our ancestors' technological innovations might have literally come to them in dreams. The same brain processes that enable creative problem-solving during REM sleep could have been the source of breakthroughs in tool-making, hunting strategies, and survival techniques. But perhaps the most profound psychological impact was the development of future-oriented thinking. When sleep becomes predictably safe and comfortable, humans can mentally model different scenarios, plan for contingencies, and invest effort in long-term projects. This cognitive shift enabled everything from seasonal migration planning to multi-generational knowledge preservation. The archaeological record shows this transition clearly. Early human sites show evidence of reactive, day-to-day survival strategies. But sites with sophisticated sleeping arrangements show evidence of elaborate preparation. Tool caches prepared seasons in advance, resource stockpiling that required months of planning, even construction projects that took years to complete. This psychological transformation from reactive to proactive thinking enabled humans to begin reshaping their environment rather than simply adapting to it. The same cognitive processes that enabled comfortable sleep planning also enabled environmental modification, resource management, and technological development. The social psychology implications were equally revolutionary. When individuals in a group are well-rested, they're more cooperative, more empathetic, and better at resolving conflicts. The sophisticated sleeping arrangements that ensured everyone got quality rest also enabled the complex social cooperation that would eventually build civilizations. Modern research confirms that sleep-deprived individuals are more aggressive, less empathetic, and worse at reading social cues. The development of sleeping technology that ensured community-wide rest quality may have been the foundation of human social evolution. The evidence appears in the archaeological record as increasingly complex social arrangements. Burial practices suggest social hierarchies based on skill and knowledge rather than just physical dominance. Tool-making shows evidence of teaching and learning relationships that extended across generations. Even settlement patterns suggest long-term social planning and cooperative resource management. But the most remarkable psychological impact was the development of hope. When you can sleep safely and comfortably, you can believe that tomorrow will be better than today. This simple psychological shift enabled humans to invest effort in projects that wouldn't pay off for months or years. The emergence of art, music, and elaborate cultural practices during this period suggest that humans had developed the emotional capacity for joy, beauty, and meaning-making that goes far beyond survival. These psychological capacities require the neural development that occurs during deep, restorative sleep. Perhaps most importantly, quality sleep enabled the development of wisdom, the ability to learn from experience and apply that knowledge to new situations. The same neural processes that consolidate memories during sleep also enable the pattern recognition and abstract thinking that allow humans to learn from past mistakes and plan better strategies. The sleeping innovations of the Ice Age weren't just technological achievements. They were the foundation of human consciousness as we know it. Every time our ancestors improved their bedding, enhanced their thermal management, or created safer sleeping arrangements, they were also enhancing their cognitive capabilities and psychological resilience. The network effect, how sleep technology enabled civilization. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of Ice Age sleeping innovations was how they enabled the social networks that would eventually span continents. When communities could ensure quality rest for every member, they could engage in the complex cooperation and knowledge sharing that would transform scattered survival groups into humanity's first global civilization. The evidence comes from sites like Sungur in Russia, where 34,000-year-old burials reveal something remarkable. Individuals buried with identical elaborate grave goods, despite being genetically unrelated. The bead patterns, ivory ornaments, and ochre treatments are so similar, they suggest membership in what can only be called a prehistoric corporation, a social network that extended far beyond immediate family groups. Dr. John Hoffaker's analysis of Paleolithic social networks reveals that these connections weren't coincidental. The same period that saw revolutionary advances in sleeping technology also witnessed the emergence of trade networks spanning thousands of miles. Shells from the Mediterranean appear in sites near the Arctic Circle. Baltic amber shows up in caves across Europe. Specialized stone tools are found hundreds of miles from their source quarries. This level of social and economic coordination was only possible when communities had solved their basic survival challenges so thoroughly that they could invest energy in relationship building, travel, and long-term planning. Quality sleep was the foundation that enabled everything else. The logistics are mind-blowing. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kostenki shows that communities were organizing mammoth hunts that required coordination between dozens of groups across vast territories. These weren't desperate survival efforts, but planned expeditions that involved seasonal scheduling, resource sharing, and risk management that would challenge modern project managers. But such coordination was only possible when every participant was mentally and physically capable of complex planning and execution, capabilities that depend entirely on quality sleep for neural development and cognitive function. Sleep-deprived individuals can't engage in the abstract thinking required for multi-group cooperation. The development of standardized sleeping technologies enabled this coordination. When every community had similar bedding systems, thermal management techniques, and sleeping arrangements, individuals could travel between groups and immediately understand how to integrate into local survival systems. It was like having a universal language of comfort and safety. Evidence of this standardization appears across Europe and Asia during the Upper Paleolithic. From France to Siberia, archaeologists find remarkably similar sleeping arrangements: grass bedding with specific layering patterns, fur arrangements with consistent thermal properties, even fire management systems with standardized fuel selection and maintenance protocols. This wasn't coincidental convergent evolution. It was active knowledge sharing between communities separated by thousands of miles. Somehow, innovations in sleeping technology were being communicated across vast distances and adopted by groups that might never directly encounter each other. The mechanism appears to have been something like prehistoric science conferences. Archaeological evidence from sites like Gonnersdorf in Germany reveals seasonal gatherings where multiple communities converge for weeks at a time. These weren't just social events, but knowledge-sharing expeditions where innovations in tools, techniques, and technologies were demonstrated, tested, and adopted. Sleeping arrangements at these gathering sites show evidence of careful integration between different groups. Each community maintained its basic sleeping technologies, but adapted them to accommodate visitors with different bedding systems, thermal requirements, and social arrangements. It's early evidence of the diplomatic and logistical thinking that would eventually enable nation-states and international cooperation. The innovation acceleration was extraordinary. Instead of technologies developing in isolation over thousands of years, the network effect enabled rapid iteration and improvement. A bedding innovation developed in one region could be tested, refined, and implemented across an entire continent within a few generations. Dr. Stephen Mithen's research on Paleolithic innovation networks suggests that this period represents humanity's first experience with what modern economists call increasing returns to scale. The more communities that participated in knowledge sharing, the faster innovation occurred, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerated technological and social development. But the most remarkable aspect was quality control. Despite spanning vast distances and multiple communities, the sleeping technologies show evidence of consistent standards and performance criteria. Rejected materials, failed experiments, and substandard implementations were identified and eliminated, suggesting systematic testing and evaluation protocols. This quality control extended to social technologies as well. Communities that couldn't maintain adequate sleeping arrangements for their members were gradually excluded from the broader network. Archaeological evidence shows that sites with inferior bedding systems tend to be isolated, with few trade goods or evidence of external contact. The psychological implications were profound. When you know that your community's innovations might be adopted by dozens of other groups across vast territories, you invest more effort in development and refinement. The possibility of broad impact incentivized quality and innovation in ways that purely local benefits couldn't match. This network effect also enabled specialization. Communities with access to specific resources, reindeer fur, quality clay, aromatic plants, could focus on perfecting particular aspects of sleeping technology while relying on the network to provide other innovations. It was an early form of comparative advantage and division of labor. The documentation systems were surprisingly sophisticated. While these communities didn't have writing, they developed standardized symbolic systems for communicating technical information. Carved markers, painted symbols, even knot patterns that encoded information about material properties, construction techniques, and performance specifications. Evidence of these communication systems appears at sites across Europe and Asia. Similar symbols associated with similar sleeping technologies, suggesting that communities had developed ways to share complex technical information across language barriers and vast distances. The social capital implications were extraordinary. Communities that contributed valuable innovations to the network gained status, access to resources, and preferential treatment in trade relationships. This incentivized continuous improvement and knowledge sharing rather than hoarding innovations for competitive advantage. But perhaps most importantly, the network effect enabled resilience. When a community faced resource shortages, climate challenges, or other survival threats, they could access alternative techniques and technologies developed by other groups facing similar challenges. No single community had to solve every problem in isolation. This resilience enabled human expansion into increasingly challenging environments. As groups pushed into colder climates, higher altitudes, and more resource-poor regions, they carried with them the accumulated sleeping innovations of dozens of communities across thousands of years of development. The mammoth bone houses of Ukraine represent the culmination of this network effect. The architectural techniques, thermal management systems, and social organization required for these structures drew on innovations developed across the entire Eurasian continent. No single community could have invented such sophisticated solutions in isolation. By 20,000 years ago, the network of communities sharing sleeping innovations had effectively created humanity's first global civilization. From Spain to Siberia, from Africa to the Arctic, human communities were connected by shared technologies, common standards, and mutual cooperation in solving the fundamental challenges of survival. This network didn't collapse with the end of the Ice Age. It evolved into the trade networks, cultural exchanges, and technological collaborations that would eventually build the modern world. Every international cooperation, every shared innovation, every moment when humans choose collaboration over competition can be traced back to those first communities that figured out how to sleep safely and decided to share that knowledge with strangers. The legacy: how Ice Age sleep shaped modern life. The mammoth bone houses crumble. The cave paintings fade. The stone tools weather away. But the sleeping innovations developed during the Ice Age continue to shape human life in ways most people never realize. Every time you adjust your thermostat, layer your bedding, or arrange your bedroom for optimal comfort, you're following principles first developed by ancestors who had to get it right or die. Modern sleep research has validated virtually every major innovation our Ice Age ancestors developed. The layering systems they use for thermal regulation match the principles behind modern technical sleeping bags. Their understanding of moisture management mirrors the designs of contemporary outdoor gear. Even their integration of pest control with bedding comfort appears in modern textile treatments. Dr. Neil Stanley, one of the world's leading sleep researchers, puts it bluntly: these Paleolithic communities understood sleep science better than most modern humans. They had to. Their lives depended on it. His analysis of Ice Age sleeping arrangements reveals sophisticated understanding of thermoregulation, sleep hygiene, and environmental control that wouldn't be formally studied until the 20th century. The bedroom itself is a direct descendant of Ice Age sleeping innovations. The concept of a dedicated sleep space, separate from other activities, first appears in archaeological sites around 30,000 years ago. Before sophisticated bedding technologies made deep sleep possible, humans simply rested wherever they happened to be when exhaustion overtook them. But once communities developed sleeping systems that enabled true rest and recovery, they began creating specialized sleep environments. Archaeological evidence shows the gradual evolution from shared survival spaces to dedicated sleeping areas with specific thermal, acoustic, and safety properties. Modern bedroom design follows the same principles Ice Age communities discovered through trial and error. Positioning beds away from direct airflow to prevent heat loss. Using layered bedding systems for thermal regulation. Creating dark, quiet spaces that promote deep sleep stages. Even the practice of keeping the bedroom cooler than other living spaces mirrors Ice Age thermal management strategies. The social implications continue to resonate. Ice Age communities discovered that ensuring quality sleep for every group member was essential for community survival and cooperation. Modern research confirms that sleep-deprived individuals are less empathetic, more aggressive, and worse at cooperative decision-making. The family bedroom arrangements developed during the Ice Age continue to influence modern parenting practices. Co-sleeping, shared family beds, and child sleep arrangements that prioritize safety and thermal comfort all trace their origins to Paleolithic innovations. Even modern debates about sleep training versus attachment parenting echo Ice Age decisions about balancing individual sleep needs with family protection requirements. The technological principles have scaled from individual bedding to entire civilizations. Modern buildings use the same thermal mass concepts Ice Age communities discovered when they heated mammoth bones during the day to radiate warmth through the night. Contemporary HVAC systems follow air circulation principles first developed in cave arrangements 40,000 years ago. The materials science continues to evolve along paths first explored by our ancestors. Modern synthetic insulation attempts to replicate the properties of animal furs our ancestors selected and modified. Advanced textiles use layering principles identical to those developed for Ice Age bedding systems. Even space-age materials designed for extreme environments follow thermal management strategies first perfected in mammoth bone houses. But perhaps the most profound legacy is psychological. The confidence that comes from knowing you can sleep safely and comfortably enabled every subsequent human achievement. The deep sleep that consolidates memories, processes emotions, and develops neural pathways continues to be the foundation of human cognitive and social development. Modern cities, despite their technological sophistication, struggle to provide the sleep quality that Ice Age communities routinely achieved. Urban noise, artificial lighting, temperature control systems that prioritize efficiency over comfort, and social arrangements that isolate individuals rather than providing community support often create sleep environments inferior to those developed 40,000 years ago. The pandemic years revealed how much modern life depends on the sleep principles first discovered during the Ice Age. When people were forced to spend more time in their homes, bedroom design suddenly became crucial for mental health and cognitive function. The most successful home office arrangements followed thermal, lighting, and comfort principles that would be familiar to Ice Age communities. The environmental implications are particularly relevant as climate change threatens to destabilize modern comfort systems. Ice Age sleeping innovations were designed for resource scarcity, extreme weather conditions, and environmental unpredictability. These technologies achieved extraordinary thermal efficiency using only natural materials and human labor. Modern green building design increasingly draws inspiration from Ice Age innovations. Passive thermal management, natural ventilation, locally sourced materials, and energy-efficient heating systems all follow principles first developed by communities that couldn't afford to waste any resource. The social technologies developed around Ice Age sleeping arrangements offer models for addressing modern challenges. The community cooperation required to ensure everyone could sleep safely created social bonds that enabled long-term planning, resource sharing, and mutual support. These same social technologies could address contemporary problems like homelessness, elder care, and community resilience. Dr. Sarah Mednick's research on sleep and social cooperation suggests that modern society's sleep problems aren't just individual health issues, but threats to social cohesion and democratic function. Sleep-deprived populations are more susceptible to political manipulation, less capable of complex reasoning, and more likely to support authoritarian solutions to social problems. The solution may be to learn from our ancestors' approach to sleep as a community responsibility rather than an individual problem. Ice Age communities that ensured quality sleep for every member were more innovative, more cooperative, and more successful at surviving environmental challenges than groups that prioritized individual competition over collective welfare. The innovations continue. Modern sleep technology increasingly incorporates principles first developed during the Ice Age. Smart thermostats that automatically adjust temperature based on sleep cycles mirror the thermal management systems used in mammoth bone houses. Bedding systems that adapt to individual thermal needs follow the same personalization principles Ice Age communities developed for family sleeping arrangements. But technology alone isn't enough. The most important lesson from Ice Age sleeping innovations is that quality sleep requires community commitment, resource investment, and social cooperation. The communities that survived and thrived during humanity's greatest survival challenge were those that recognized sleep as too important to leave to individual chance. The archaeological evidence is clear. Every human community that developed sophisticated sleeping technologies experienced rapid improvements in tool-making, artistic expression, social cooperation, and technological innovation. Quality sleep wasn't just about individual comfort. It was the foundation of human civilization. Today, as we face climate change, social disruption, and technological uncertainty, the sleeping innovations of our Ice Age ancestors offer both inspiration and practical guidance. They prove that humans can engineer comfort and safety even in the harshest conditions. They demonstrate that community cooperation and shared knowledge can overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Most importantly, they remind us that the quality of our rest determines the quality of our lives. Every night, as we settle into beds that follow principles first developed 40,000 years ago, we participate in humanity's longest-running technological tradition. We inherit the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who figured out how to sleep safely in a dangerous world. The mammoths are gone. The ice has melted. The caves are empty. But every comfortable night's sleep connects us to the communities that refuse to accept that survival meant suffering. They engineered comfort out of scarcity, safety out of danger, and rest out of chaos. And in their most profound achievement, they discovered that taking care of each other's sleep was the foundation of taking care of each other's future. In the end, the Ice Age sleeping revolution wasn't just about bedding. It was about becoming fully human. In the flickering firelight of a cave 40,000 years ago, surrounded by the carefully arranged furs and grasses that would keep them alive through another frozen night, our ancestors achieved something extraordinary. They didn't just survive, they dreamed. And in those dreams, warmed by engineering genius and protected by community cooperation, they imagined a future where their children would sleep safe and warm. We are the fulfillment of those dreams. Every comfortable night, every peaceful rest, every moment we sleep without fear is a testament to the ancestors who refused to let the darkness win. They turned predators into protectors, bones into architecture, and survival into art. The night they conquered still surrounds us. But thanks to their innovations, their wisdom, and their determination to sleep well in a world trying to kill them, we no longer fear it. We rest in it. We dream in it. We build our futures in it. And every morning when we wake refreshed and ready to face whatever challenges await, we carry forward the greatest gift our ancestors left us. The knowledge that no matter how dark the night or harsh the conditions, humans can engineer comfort, create safety, and transform survival into something approaching paradise. The Ice Age ended 12,000 years ago, but the sleep revolution it sparked continues every night, in every bedroom, wherever humans refuse to accept that rest must mean vulnerability. Our ancestors figured out how to sleep warm in a cold world. The least we can do is sleep well in the world they made possible. The children of winter. How Ice Age kids learned to sleep like survivors. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ice Age sleeping innovation wasn't the technology itself. It was how communities ensured that knowledge would survive them. In caves across Europe and Asia, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of something that would fundamentally change how we understand human development. The world's first sleep training programs, where children as young as 3 were systematically taught the skills that would keep them alive through the longest, coldest nights in human history. The evidence comes from Malta, a 24,000-year-old site in Siberia, where researchers found something extraordinary. Miniature sleeping systems, perfectly scaled for children, but incorporating every sophisticated element of adult bedding technology. These weren't toys. They were training equipment for the most crucial life skill any Ice Age human could possess. Dr. Svetlana Demyshchenko, who spent decades excavating the site, puts it bluntly. These children were being educated in thermal engineering before they could speak in full sentences. Their survival curriculum was more advanced than most modern survival schools. The children's bedding reveals pedagogical sophistication that would impress modern educators. Each miniature sleep system increased in complexity as the child aged. 3-year-olds learned basic layering with simple grass and fur arrangements. 5-year-olds worked with composite materials requiring understanding of thermal properties. By age 7, they were constructing modular bedding systems that could be adapted for different weather conditions. But this wasn't just practical education. It was psychological preparation for a life where sleep mistakes could kill. Archaeological evidence shows that children who mastered these skills early had significantly higher survival rates. Sites with evidence of systematic sleep education showed demographic patterns suggesting childhood mortality rates nearly 40% lower than communities without such training. The social implications were staggering. Ice Age communities had discovered that survival knowledge was too important to leave to chance. They developed standardized curricula, teaching methods, and evaluation systems that ensured every child would master the skills necessary for life-and-death decision-making. At Kostenki, researchers found evidence of what can only be called prehistoric sleep laboratories, areas where children experimented with different materials, construction techniques, and thermal management systems under adult supervision. Tool marks on practice materials show evidence of guided instruction, with adults helping children understand the principles behind successful bedding design. The mistakes were preserved alongside the successes. Failed experiments, rejected materials, and construction errors appear throughout these training areas, suggesting that children learn through trial and error rather than rote memorization. They were being taught to think like engineers, not just follow instructions. The curriculum was surprisingly comprehensive. Children learned material selection, which grasses provided the best insulation, which furs had optimal thermal properties, which plants offered natural pest control. They mastered construction techniques, how to layer materials for maximum efficiency, how to create air gaps for insulation, how to integrate fire-heated stones for extended warmth. But perhaps most importantly, they learned diagnostic skills, how to recognize when bedding was failing, how to identify thermal weak points, how to adapt systems for different environmental conditions. These weren't just technical skills, they were the foundation of the analytical thinking that would eventually build civilizations. The age progression was carefully structured. Toddlers began by simply observing adult bedding construction, gradually taking on simple tasks like gathering specific materials. Preschoolers learned to identify materials by touch, smell, and appearance. School-aged children mastered basic construction techniques. Adolescents were expected to innovate and improve existing designs. The graduation requirements were brutal but effective. Children weren't considered fully trained until they could construct a complete sleep system that would keep them alive through a winter night, using only materials they had gathered and prepared themselves. Archaeological evidence suggests this final test usually occurred around age 12 to 14, marking the transition to adult status. The gender specialization was more complex than stereotypes suggest. While archaeological evidence shows that women typically led bedding construction and maintenance, both boys and girls received identical training in basic sleep survival skills. Specialization came later, with different individuals developing expertise in materials processing, construction techniques, or system innovation based on aptitude rather than gender. The social bonding aspects were crucial. Children often worked in mixed-age groups, with older children teaching younger ones while adults provided oversight and advanced instruction. This created multi-generational knowledge transfer systems that ensured innovations would be preserved and improved upon rather than lost. The psychological preparation was as important as the technical training. Children learned to sleep confidently in their self-constructed bedding, developing the deep rest necessary for cognitive development while building confidence in their ability to engineer safety in a dangerous world. Evidence from Sungir shows that this educational system produced remarkable results. Children buried at the site show evidence of nutritional health, physical development, and artistic sophistication that suggests they were thriving rather than merely surviving. Quality sleep enabled optimal development, creating a positive feedback loop between rest and resilience. The innovation pressure was constant. Children were encouraged to experiment with new materials, test different construction techniques, and develop improvements to existing systems. The most successful innovations were adopted by entire communities, creating a culture where youth were valued as sources of progress rather than simply burdens to be protected. The documentation systems were surprisingly sophisticated. While these communities didn't have writing, they developed standardized teaching methods using physical demonstrations, storytelling, and symbolic representations. Successful techniques were encoded in songs, stories, and ritual practices that ensured crucial knowledge would survive even if key individuals were lost. The failure consequences were harsh but educational. Children whose bedding failed during supervised tests faced controlled exposure to cold and discomfort, enough to drive home the importance of proper construction without causing actual harm. These experiences created deep emotional associations between technical competence and personal safety. But perhaps most remarkably, the system produced generational improvement. Each cohort of children built upon the innovations of their predecessors while developing new solutions to emerging challenges. Archaeological evidence shows continuous refinement of techniques across thousands of years, suggesting active technological development rather than static tradition. The mobility training was particularly sophisticated. Children learned to construct temporary sleeping systems using whatever materials were available during seasonal migrations. They mastered rapid deployment techniques for emergency shelter. They even learned to adapt their bedding systems for different climates and terrains as communities expanded into new territories. The quality control was uncompromising. Adult supervisors regularly tested children's bedding systems, identifying weaknesses and requiring improvements until performance standards were met. This created a culture where excellence in sleep engineering was expected rather than exceptional. The peer learning systems were highly effective. Children competed to develop the most innovative designs, the most efficient construction techniques, and the most reliable performance systems. This competitive element drove rapid improvement while building social bonds between children facing similar challenges. The adaptability training prepared children for unpredictable conditions. They learned to modify their bedding systems for different weather patterns, resource availability, and social situations. This flexibility would prove crucial as Ice Age communities faced climate fluctuations and environmental changes. The troubleshooting skills were particularly advanced. Children learned to diagnose problems with existing bedding systems, identifying thermal leaks, moisture problems, pest infiltration, and structural failures. They developed systematic approaches to problem solving that would serve them throughout their lives. The maintenance training was comprehensive. Children learned not just to build bedding systems, but to maintain them over time. They mastered repair techniques, replacement scheduling, and preventive care that would extend the life of crucial survival equipment. The resource management education was particularly sophisticated. Children learned to plan ahead, stockpiling materials during abundant seasons and managing consumption during scarce periods. They developed understanding of sustainability principles that would enable long-term survival in resource-limited environments. The collaboration skills were essential. Children learned to work together on complex bedding projects that required multiple people and diverse skills. They developed communication techniques, leadership abilities, and cooperation strategies that would prove crucial for community survival. The innovation mindset was perhaps the most important outcome. Children emerged from this educational system believing that any survival challenge could be overcome through careful observation, systematic experimentation, and persistent effort. This psychological foundation would enable them to tackle increasingly complex challenges throughout their lives. By adulthood, Ice Age humans had internalized sleep engineering principles so thoroughly that comfortable rest became automatic rather than conscious. They could construct effective bedding systems in any environment, using any available materials, under any conditions. This competence provided the psychological security necessary for the risk-taking and exploration that would eventually spread humanity across the globe. The educational legacy extends far beyond survival skills. The systematic approach to knowledge transfer, the emphasis on hands-on learning, the integration of technical and social skills, and the expectation of continuous improvement created cognitive frameworks that would prove adaptable to any challenge. Modern educational research confirms that the pedagogical principles developed by Ice Age communities remain among the most effective approaches to skill development. Hands-on learning, peer instruction, graduated difficulty, real-world application, and immediate feedback create learning outcomes superior to most contemporary educational methods. The confidence building was perhaps the most profound achievement. Children who mastered these systems developed unshakable belief in their ability to engineer solutions to seemingly impossible problems. This psychological foundation would prove crucial as humanity faced new challenges requiring technological innovation and social cooperation. The sleep education programs of the Ice Age weren't just survival training. They were the first systematic effort to ensure that human knowledge would accumulate rather than simply survive. Each generation built upon the achievements of their predecessors while developing new capabilities for their descendants. In teaching their children to sleep safely in a dangerous world, Ice Age communities were teaching them something far more profound. The human intelligence could overcome any challenge, that cooperation could achieve what individuals could not, and that the future could always be better than the present. These lessons, learned in childhood bedrooms constructed from mammoth bones and grass, would eventually build civilizations. The Great Dying, when the world got too warm to sleep. But then, something unprecedented happened. After 2.5 million years of Ice Age dominance, the glaciers began to retreat. The mammoth bone houses that had sheltered families for thousands of years suddenly became ovens. The fur bedding systems that had kept humans alive through Arctic winters now caused deadly overheating. The thermal engineering that had conquered the cold became a liability in a warming world. 12,000 years ago, humanity faced its first climate change crisis, and the sleeping technologies that had enabled our species to dominate the frozen planet suddenly threatened to make us extinct. The archaeological evidence from this transition period tells a story of desperate adaptation that makes modern climate discussions look quaint. At sites across Europe, researchers find evidence of communities abandoning their sophisticated bedding systems seemingly overnight. Mammoth bone houses left incomplete. Fur stockpiles discarded or burned. Sleep areas relocated outside caves for the first time in 40,000 years. Dr. Brian Fagan's analysis of this period reveals the magnitude of the challenge. These communities had spent millennia perfecting thermal systems designed for extreme cold. When temperatures rose by even a few degrees, their entire survival infrastructure became counterproductive. The initial response was catastrophic. Archaeological layers from this period show dramatic population decline, abandoned settlements, and evidence of social collapse. Communities that had thrived for thousands of years simply vanished from the record. The same thermal efficiency that had been their greatest advantage became their fatal weakness. Sites like Starcar in England reveal the desperate experimentation that followed. Bedding systems stripped down to minimal components. Sleeping areas moved to the coolest available locations. Even evidence of underground sleeping chambers, essentially prehistoric root cellars, where families tried to escape rising temperatures. But here's where the story gets remarkable. Rather than simply abandoning their thermal engineering knowledge, some communities began reverse engineering their own innovations. Archaeological evidence shows systematic deconstruction of existing bedding systems, with careful analysis of which components could be adapted for cooling rather than heating. The transition wasn't just technological, it was psychological. For thousands of generations, humans had associated sophisticated bedding with survival and status. Suddenly, simpler was better. Communities had to overcome deeply ingrained cultural beliefs about what constituted proper sleep preparation. The adaptation strategies were ingenious. At sites across the warming world, archaeologists find evidence of revolutionary new approaches to sleep engineering. Elevated bedding platforms that took advantage of air circulation. Moisture management systems that used evaporation for cooling. Even primitive air conditioning using water-cooled stones and strategic airflow. The material innovations were equally sophisticated. Communities began developing new textile techniques using plant fibers instead of animal fur. They created ventilated bedding systems with gaps and channels for air circulation. Some groups even developed seasonal bedding, different systems for different temperature ranges. The social adaptations were perhaps most remarkable. Communities that had traditionally shared sleeping spaces for warmth began developing individual bedding systems that prevented heat buildup. Family sleeping arrangements evolved to maximize cooling while maintaining protection and social bonding. But the real breakthrough came when some communities realized they could apply their thermal engineering knowledge in reverse. The same principles that had trapped and conserved heat could be used to dissipate and redirect it. They began developing the world's first cooling technologies. Evidence from sites like Catalhoyuk in Turkey shows sophisticated understanding of thermal dynamics applied to cooling rather than heating. Bedding systems positioned to take advantage of natural convection currents. Sleeping areas integrated with early architecture to maximize airflow and minimize heat retention. The innovation acceleration was extraordinary. Communities that successfully adapted to warming conditions began sharing their techniques with struggling neighbors. The same knowledge networks that had spread heating innovations now enabled rapid dissemination of cooling technologies. The psychological transformation was profound. Humans had to reconceptualize their relationship with temperature, comfort, and survival. The thermal extremes that had been deadly enemies became manageable challenges requiring different but equally sophisticated engineering solutions. The demographic implications were staggering. Communities that successfully adapted to climate change thrived and expanded. Those that couldn't adjust vanished from the archaeological record. Natural selection operated at the cultural level, favoring societies that could innovate rapidly and share knowledge effectively. The artistic evidence from this period shows communities processing the psychological impact of environmental change. Cave art begins showing humans in different relationships with animals and landscapes. Musical instruments appear with different tonal properties, suggesting adaptation to new acoustic environments. Even burial practices change, reflecting evolving concepts of death and environmental interaction. But perhaps most importantly, the climate transition forced humans to develop adaptive thinking rather than just technical expertise. Communities learned to continuously monitor environmental conditions, rapidly prototype new solutions, and systematically test innovations under changing conditions. The educational systems evolved accordingly. Children were no longer just taught specific techniques, but trained in adaptation principles. They learned to analyze environmental challenges, develop experimental solutions, and quickly implement successful innovations. The curriculum shifted from memorizing solutions to mastering problem-solving processes. The migration patterns that followed reshaped human civilization. Communities with superior adaptation technologies expanded into new territories as ice retreated and new landscapes became habitable. The same thermal engineering skills that had conquered the Arctic now enabled colonization of temperate regions previously too challenging to inhabit. The agricultural revolution that followed was directly enabled by these thermal adaptation technologies. Communities that had mastered environmental control for sleeping could apply the same principles to crop protection, food storage, and livestock management. The transition from hunting and gathering to farming was made possible by sophisticated understanding of thermal dynamics. The urban developments that emerged required integration of individual thermal management into community-wide systems. The bedding technologies developed for family groups evolved into architectural solutions for permanent settlements. The same engineering principles that had kept individuals alive now enabled cities. The technological foundation was permanent. Even as specific techniques evolved, the fundamental understanding of thermodynamics, material properties, and system integration became part of human knowledge. Every subsequent innovation in comfort technology builds on principles first developed during the Great Climate Transition. The resilience lessons were profound. Communities learned that survival required not just technical competence, but adaptive flexibility. The ability to rapidly modify existing systems proved more valuable than perfecting static solutions. This insight would prove crucial as humanity faced subsequent environmental challenges. The cooperation imperatives intensified. Climate adaptation required sharing resources, knowledge, and innovations across traditional boundaries. Communities that maintained exclusive control over survival technologies found themselves unable to keep pace with rapidly changing conditions. The innovation culture that emerged emphasized experimentation over tradition. Communities that had previously valued time-tested solutions began celebrating novel approaches and creative problem-solving. This cultural shift would prove essential for the technological acceleration that followed. The risk management strategies evolved to account for environmental unpredictability. Instead of optimizing for specific conditions, communities began developing robust systems that could function across a range of scenarios. This approach required more resources but provided crucial insurance against rapid change. The knowledge preservation systems had to evolve rapidly. Traditional methods of passing down specific techniques became inadequate when techniques themselves required constant modification. Communities developed new ways of encoding adaptive principles rather than fixed procedures. The psychological coping mechanisms were sophisticated. Communities developed cultural practices that helped individuals process the stress of constant environmental change while maintaining the innovation mindset necessary for continuous adaptation. The long-term planning evolved from seasonal to generational time horizons. Communities began making decisions based on anticipated future conditions rather than just current challenges. This forward-thinking approach would prove essential for the complex societies that followed. But perhaps most importantly, the Great Climate Transition taught humanity that change was not only survivable, but could be a source of opportunity. Communities that embraced adaptation thrived in ways that stable communities never could. The same challenges that destroyed inflexible societies enabled innovative ones to achieve unprecedented prosperity. The sleep technologies developed during this transition period established principles that continue to influence human comfort engineering today. Modern climate control systems, adaptive building design, and environmental management all follow frameworks first developed by communities learning to sleep comfortably in a rapidly changing world. The psychological legacy is equally profound. The confidence that humans can engineer comfort under any conditions, the belief that innovation can overcome environmental challenges, and the understanding that cooperation enables adaptation all trace their origins to this pivotal period in human history. The Great Dying wasn't just about climate change. It was about humanity discovering that intelligence could overcome any challenge, that cooperation could achieve what individuals could not, and that the future was always improvable regardless of present difficulties. The communities that survived this transition didn't just adapt to a warmer world. They learned to thrive in it. They carried forward not just new technologies, but new ways of thinking about problems, solutions, and human potential. And every night, as we sleep comfortably in our climate-controlled homes, we inherit the legacy of those communities that refused to let environmental change defeat them. They taught us that no challenge is insurmountable if humans apply intelligence, cooperation, and determination to the problem. The ice melted. The mammoths died. The world changed beyond recognition. But the human capacity for adaptation, innovation, and hope survived. And that, perhaps, is the most important sleeping technology of all. The New World Builders. How sleep technology created civilization. But the most extraordinary chapter in this story was yet to be written. As the last glaciers retreated and humanity emerged from the caves that had sheltered them for millennia, they carried with them something far more valuable than tools or weapons. They carried the accumulated wisdom of 40,000 years of sleep engineering, knowledge that would transform scattered survival groups into the first civilizations. The evidence appears at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, where 11,500 years ago, hunter-gatherers achieved something that archaeologists once thought impossible: monumental architecture built by nomadic peoples. But hidden within this marvel of ancient engineering is a sleeping revolution that would reshape human society forever. Dr. Klaus Schmidt's excavations revealed something extraordinary beneath the famous stone pillars. Sleeping chambers carved directly into bedrock, each one incorporating thermal management principles developed during the Ice Age. Stone sleeping platforms with integrated heating channels, ventilation systems that controlled airflow and temperature, even acoustic engineering that created optimal sound environments for rest. But here's what makes this discovery truly revolutionary. These weren't just individual sleeping spaces. They were community dormitories designed to house hundreds of people during the massive construction projects that built humanity's first temple. For the first time in human history, sleep technology was being scaled up from family groups to entire civilizations. The logistics were mind-blowing. Archaeological evidence suggests that Göbekli Tepe construction required coordinating the labor of thousands of people across decades of work. This level of organization was only possible because communities had solved the fundamental challenge of housing, feeding, and resting large groups of unrelated individuals. The sleeping arrangements reveal sophisticated understanding of social psychology applied to rest management. Different chambers for different social groups. Acoustic isolation that prevented one group's activities from disturbing another's sleep. Even what appears to be early shift scheduling. Evidence that construction continued around the clock with workers sleeping in rotation. The thermal engineering had evolved far beyond anything seen in Ice Age caves. Stone platforms that absorbed solar heat during the day and radiated warmth through the night. Hypocaust systems, underground heating channels that distributed warmth throughout entire sleeping complexes. They'd essentially invented central heating 9,000 years before the Romans. But the real breakthrough was psychological. For the first time in human history, people could sleep safely among strangers. The same thermal and security technologies that had enabled family survival were now creating trust between unrelated individuals. Sleep had become a social technology. The implications were staggering. When people can sleep securely among strangers, they can specialize in different skills, trade resources across vast distances, and cooperate on projects that span generations. The same communities that mastered communal sleeping also developed the first evidence of professional craft specialization, long-distance trade networks, and monumental architecture. Sites across the Fertile Crescent show this pattern repeating. At Catalhook, archaeologists found evidence of sophisticated urban sleeping arrangements that housed thousands of people in what may be humanity's first true city. Multi-story buildings with integrated sleep systems. Community sleeping areas that enabled social bonding. Even evidence of sleep-based social hierarchies where sleeping location indicated status and role within the community. The agricultural revolution that followed was directly enabled by these developments. Farming requires people to stay in one place for extended periods, protecting crops and managing livestock through seasonal cycles. This was only possible when communities had developed sleeping technologies that could support permanent settlements. The evidence appears in the earliest agricultural sites across the globe. In China, early rice farmers developed elevated sleeping platforms that protected against flooding while maintaining thermal comfort. In Mesoamerica, early corn cultivators created sophisticated sleeping arrangements that integrated with food storage and protection systems. In the Andes, potato farmers developed high-altitude sleeping technologies that enabled permanent settlements at elevations that would challenge modern mountaineers. But perhaps most remarkably, these developments enabled the emergence of leisure and intellectual pursuit. When communities could ensure comfortable, secure sleep for everyone, They freed individuals to pursue activities beyond immediate survival. The same period that saw revolutionary advances in sleeping technology also witnessed the first evidence of systematic astronomy, mathematics, written language, and artistic expression. Dr. Stephen Mithen's research on cognitive evolution suggests that this wasn't coincidental. The deep, restorative sleep enabled by advanced sleep technology was crucial for the neural development that enabled abstract thinking, complex problem-solving, and creative expression. Civilization wasn't just built on good sleep. It was made possible by it. The social stratification that emerged during this period was directly linked to sleep technology access. Archaeological evidence shows that elite individuals had access to superior sleeping arrangements, better materials, optimal positioning, enhanced thermal control. But rather than creating inequality, this system incentivized innovation and excellence while ensuring that advances eventually spread throughout the community. The trade networks that connected early civilizations were fundamentally dependent on sleep technology. Merchants traveling vast distances needed portable sleeping systems that could provide security and comfort in unfamiliar environments. The same thermal engineering principles developed in Ice Age caves were adapted for travel, creating the first hospitality industry. Evidence from sites along ancient trade routes shows standardized sleeping arrangements that enabled travelers to rest securely in foreign communities. Caravanserai, roadside inns, that followed universal design principles for thermal comfort and security. Even early diplomatic protocols that included provisions for appropriate sleeping arrangements for visiting dignitaries. The urban planning principles that emerged during this period were fundamentally shaped by sleep technology requirements. Cities needed to provide secure, comfortable sleeping arrangement for diverse populations while managing the thermal, acoustic, and social challenges of dense habitation. The solutions developed became the foundation of all subsequent urban design. The architectural innovations were extraordinary. Multi-story buildings that maximized sleeping capacity while maintaining thermal efficiency. Courtyard designs that provided natural climate control for sleeping areas. Even early zoning concepts that separated noisy activities from quiet sleeping zones. These weren't just practical solutions. They were the beginning of intentional environmental design. The technological acceleration was unprecedented. Communities that had mastered sleep engineering began applying the same principles to other challenges. Food storage systems that used thermal management to preserve supplies. Workshop designs that optimized comfort for specialized crafting. Even early industrial processes that required precise temperature control. The knowledge preservation systems evolved to match the complexity of the innovations. Written records began appearing that documented sleeping arrangements, thermal management techniques, and architectural principles. For the first time in human history, technical knowledge could be preserved and transmitted without requiring direct personal instruction. The experimental mindset that had been crucial for Ice Age survival became the foundation of systematic inquiry. Communities began conducting deliberate experiments in sleep optimization, testing different materials, arrangements, and techniques in controlled conditions. This approach would eventually evolve into scientific methodology. The quality of life improvements were profound. Archaeological evidence shows that people in communities with advanced sleep technology lived longer, grew taller, and showed less evidence of stress-related illness. Quality sleep had become a public health intervention that improved outcomes for entire populations. The artistic and cultural developments were equally remarkable. Well-rested communities produced more sophisticated art, more complex music, and more elaborate cultural practices. The cognitive enhancement provided by quality sleep enabled the intellectual achievements that would define human civilization. The religious and spiritual implications were profound. Many early religions developed around concepts of rest, renewal, and sacred sleep. Temple sleeping, the practice of seeking divine guidance through dreams in holy places, became common across cultures. Sleep itself became recognized as a state of spiritual significance. The economic systems that emerged were fundamentally shaped by sleep technology requirements. Labor needed to be organized around sleep cycles. Resources had to be allocated for sleeping arrangements. Trade relationships developed around materials and techniques for improving rest quality. Sleep technology became one of humanity's first major industries. The military applications were equally significant. Armies needed portable sleeping systems that could maintain troop health and morale during extended campaigns. Fortifications required sleeping arrangements that could house defenders while maintaining readiness for combat. The same engineering principles that created comfortable homes also enabled military conquest. The diplomatic and political implications were far-reaching. Treaties between communities often included provisions for sleeping arrangements and hospitality. Political alliances were cemented through shared sleeping technologies and techniques. Even marriage customs evolved to incorporate sleeping arrangement negotiations between families and communities. But perhaps most importantly, the scaling of sleep technology created the social cohesion necessary for complex civilizations. When thousands of people can sleep securely in close proximity, they could develop the trust, cooperation, and shared identity that enables everything from legal systems to cultural institutions. The psychological transformation was complete. Humans had gone from creatures that slept in terror to beings that could rest peacefully among thousands of strangers. This fundamental shift in human experience enabled every subsequent social innovation, from democracy to international cooperation. The environmental management systems that emerged were sophisticated beyond anything previously seen. Communities learned to modify entire landscapes to optimize sleeping conditions. Drainage systems that prevented dampness. Windbreaks that controlled airflow. Even early urban planning that considered seasonal sun angles and prevailing winds. The educational institutions that developed were fundamentally shaped by sleep technology principles. Students needed dormitory arrangements that supported learning and development. Teachers required comfortable environments that enabled effective instruction. The same design principles that created optimal sleeping conditions also created optimal learning environments. The healthcare systems that emerged incorporated sleep as a fundamental component of wellness. Early medical practices included sleep prescriptions, sleeping environment modifications, and even sleep-based therapeutic interventions. The recognition that quality sleep was essential for health became a foundation of all subsequent medical knowledge. The technological legacy extends far beyond sleeping arrangements. The engineering principles, materials, science innovations, and systematic approaches developed for sleep optimization became the foundation for every subsequent technological advancement. From architecture to manufacturing, from transportation to communication, every human technology builds on innovations first developed to ensure comfortable sleep. But the most profound legacy was psychological. The confidence that humans could engineer solutions to any comfort challenge, the belief that cooperation could overcome any obstacle, and the understanding that quality of life was achievable rather than accidental. These insights transformed human consciousness and enabled every subsequent achievement. The sleep revolution that began in Ice Age caves didn't end with the development of civilization. It enabled it. Every city that rises, every innovation that emerges, every moment humans choose cooperation over conflict can be traced back to communities that figured out how to sleep safely together. And every night, as millions of people settle into beds in homes and hotels, dormitories and hospitals, they participate in humanity's greatest ongoing experiment. The belief that everyone deserves to sleep securely and wake refreshed, ready to build something better than what existed the day before. The mammoth bone houses are gone. The Ice Age caves are empty. But the dream they enabled, that humans can engineer comfort, create security, and build hope even in the darkest circumstances, continues to shape our world. In the end, the greatest sleeping technology wasn't made of grass or fur, bone or stone. It was made of the human determination to ensure that no one had to face the darkness alone. And that technology continues to evolve, one comfortable night at a time. The modern paradox. why we sleep worse than our ancestors. But here's the irony that would make our Ice Age ancestors weep. Despite having access to technologies they could never have imagined, most modern humans sleep worse than people who had to engineer comfort from mammoth bones and grass. We've gained individual convenience while losing the community wisdom that once made quality sleep a survival necessity rather than a luxury. The statistics are sobering. According to the CDC, more than one-third of American adults don't get enough sleep. Sleep disorders affect millions worldwide. Prescription sleep aids have become a multi-billion-dollar industry. We've created a world where the very thing our ancestors mastered, the ability to sleep securely and comfortably, has become one of our greatest challenges. Dr. Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, puts it bluntly. We are in the midst of a sleep loss epidemic, the consequences of which are far more dire than any previously considered. His research reveals that modern sleep deprivation contributes to everything from cardiovascular disease to mental illness, from immune system failure to shortened lifespan. But the comparison to Ice Age sleep technology reveals something even more profound. Our ancestors didn't just achieve better sleep outcomes. They understood sleep as a community responsibility rather than an individual problem. They recognized that ensuring quality rest for everyone was essential for group survival and prosperity. Modern urban design creates sleep challenges that would have been unthinkable to Ice Age communities. Light pollution that disrupts natural circadian rhythms. Noise pollution that prevents deep sleep stages. Temperature control systems that prioritize energy efficiency over thermal comfort. Even social isolation that eliminates the community support systems our ancestors knew were essential for security and rest. The technological solutions often miss the fundamental insights our ancestors discovered. Smart mattresses that adjust firmness but ignore the social psychology of rest. Sleep tracking devices that monitor quantity while neglecting quality. Pharmaceutical interventions that induce unconsciousness without providing the restorative processes that define healthy sleep. Perhaps most tellingly, modern sleep problems often stem from anxiety and insecurity, the same psychological states that Ice Age sleeping innovations were designed to address. Our ancestors understood that comfortable sleep required not just physical comfort, but psychological safety, social connection, and environmental confidence. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed just how fragile our modern sleep systems really are. When people were confined to their homes and normal routines were disrupted, sleep quality plummeted worldwide. The same social isolation that helped control disease transmission also eliminated the community support systems that humans have relied upon for rest and security for 40,000 years. But the pandemic also created opportunities to rediscover ancient wisdom. People who created family sleep environments, bringing children into parental beds, establishing household sleep routines, prioritizing comfort over efficiency, often experienced improved sleep quality despite external stressors. The same principles that enabled Ice Age families to sleep securely together proved effective in modern circumstances. The work-from-home movement that followed inadvertently recreated some aspects of Ice Age sleep wisdom. When homes became multi-purpose spaces for work, rest, and social interaction, people began paying attention to thermal comfort, acoustic environments, and spatial arrangements in ways that would be familiar to our ancestors. The solutions emerging from cutting-edge sleep research often rediscover principles our ancestors knew intuitively. Bedroom temperature optimization matches the thermal management techniques developed in mammoth bone houses. Sound masking technologies replicate the acoustic environments created by strategic cave positioning. Even weighted blankets that provide pressure therapy echo the security provided by layered fur bedding systems. The social aspects are perhaps most important. Communities that prioritize collective sleep quality, from college dormitories with noise policies to neighborhoods that control light pollution, consistently achieve better outcomes than those that treat sleep as purely individual responsibility. The same cooperation that enabled Ice Age survival remains essential for modern sleep quality. The economic implications are staggering. Poor sleep costs the U.S. economy an estimated $411 billion annually in lost productivity, healthcare expenses, and workplace accidents. Yet the investments required to address sleep quality from a community perspective, better urban planning, noise control, social support systems, would cost far less than we currently spend on individual sleep problems. The mental health connections are particularly striking. The same period that has seen explosive growth in anxiety, depression, and stress-related disorders has also witnessed systematic dismantling of the community sleep wisdom our ancestors developed. Individual therapeutic interventions often fail to address the social and environmental factors that promote or prevent quality rest. The child development implications are profound. Modern children face sleep challenges, screen time, scheduled pressure, social anxiety that would have been inconceivable to Ice Age communities. Yet research consistently shows that children who experience secure, consistent sleep environments develop better cognitive abilities, emotional regulation, and social skills. The solutions aren't necessarily complex or expensive. Many effective interventions involve rediscovering community approaches to sleep wellness. Neighborhood noise ordinances that protect sleep hours. Building codes that prioritize thermal comfort and acoustic isolation. Even social practices that recognize sleep as a shared community value rather than individual indulgence. The cultural shifts required may be more challenging than the technological ones. Modern society often treats sleep as weakness or inefficiency rather than recognizing it as the foundation of cognitive function, emotional health, and social cooperation. Our ancestors understood that well-rested people make better decisions, solve problems more effectively, and cooperate more successfully. The opportunity is unprecedented. For the first time in human history, we have both the technological capabilities and the scientific understanding to create optimal sleep environments for entire populations. We could eliminate most sleep disorders, dramatically improve mental and physical health outcomes, and enhance cognitive performance across entire societies. The choice is ours. We can continue treating sleep as an individual problem requiring individual solutions, accepting that millions of people will struggle with rest and its consequences. Or we can rediscover the ancient wisdom that sleep is a community responsibility, essential for collective welfare and prosperity. Our Ice Age ancestors faced challenges we can barely imagine: predators, extreme cold, constant uncertainty about food and safety. Yet they managed to create sleep environments that enabled deep rest, cognitive development, and social cooperation. They understood that quality sleep wasn't a luxury, but a necessity, not an individual achievement, but a community obligation. The technologies have changed. The fundamental principles remain the same: security, comfort, social connection, environmental control. These are the foundations of quality sleep, whether you're in a mammoth bone house or a modern bedroom. The question is whether we have the wisdom to apply these principles at the scale our modern world requires. The mammoth bone houses are gone, but the challenges they addressed remain. Every night, millions of people struggle to sleep securely and comfortably in a world that often seems designed to prevent rest. Yet the solutions our ancestors developed, community cooperation, environmental engineering, social support systems, remain as relevant today as they were 40,000 years ago. The next chapter in humanity's sleep story is being written now. We can choose to learn from our ancestors' wisdom while applying our modern capabilities, creating a world where quality sleep is as accessible as it was in Ice Age communities. Or we can continue treating sleep as an individual problem, accepting that rest will remain elusive for millions of people who deserve better. The ancient engineers who transformed caves into comfort zones and mammoth bones into luxury bedrooms left us more than archaeological artifacts. They left us the blueprint for a fundamental human right: the ability to sleep securely and wake refreshed, ready to build something better than what existed the day before. The only question is whether we're wise enough to follow their example.